Hi guys, and welcome to the Unquendor Guitars workshop. My name is Daniel and this is the next part in the video series where I'm building a Gibson Firebird inspired guitar, my Phoenix Rising. And this episode is going to be all about the fretboard. So without further ado, let's get started. In the previous episode I showed you my process of getting the headstock break angle, and in episodes before that I worked on the neck blank and the neck itself. So if you haven't seen that video or those videos, I'll leave a link in the description down below, or a link to the entire playlist for this build at the end of this video. So check out those videos. So like I said, in this episode I'm going to be working mainly on the fretboard, and I'm going to use an ebony fretboard on this guitar, and I'm in luck. I still have a nice supply of ebony fretboards to choose from, which on itself is a difficult task when it comes to guitar building, choosing the right fretboard that matches the guitar. But yeah, I'm in luck. I still have some nice regular ebony fretboards, flamed ebony, really nice, and of course my personal favorite, those highly figured pieces of ebony in all kinds of varieties. Real nice, lovely dark one. And I managed to get hold of this nice spotted piece of ebony with those white and black spots. Real nice fretboard. But with ebony getting more and more rare or scarce, and that's where this package comes in. And this is a fretboard sent to me a while ago by a company called ThermalWood in Canada, and they are heat treating maple and using polymer resins to treat maple to become an ebony substitute. There are many substitutes already available or being developed, especially for musical instruments. And this company reached out to me even last year if I wanted to test one of their products, or show it at least on my channel. So here we go. I thought this was an opportune moment to see what they've sent me. You can see I have never opened this box before. I promised I would do this semi-live in a video. So yeah, there's a fretboard in here, and I'll give you a close-up in a moment. And you can see it. It's from ThermalWood in Canada, and they call this Obsidian Ebony. And it feels just like regular wood. It doesn't feel plasticky at all. I was a bit afraid when they mentioned they heat treat it and then pressure treat it with a resin. It might feel plasticky, but it isn't plasticky at all. It still feels like, well, regular ebony, to be honest. So let me give you guys a close-up, and let me know in the comment section down below what you think of, yes, substitutes for ebony. Do you prefer other species of wood being treated to be similar to ebony, or do you like the complete artificial fretboards? I can't recall the name from the top of my head right now, but there are some other more plastic based or polymer based fretboards out there. Yeah, let me know in the comment section down below if it is becoming indeed a problem to get our hands on real ebony, if the use of substitutes is something you would consider, or that you, for example, would completely switch over to Indian rosewood or maple fretboards. Yeah, let me know in the comment section down below. So for this guitar I'm going to experiment with fretboards anyway. There are some techniques I have never tried before and I'm going to experiment with that in this video. So I might as well give the Obsidian Ebony from ThermalWood a try. And what I do like about this is that it's still a real wood species, only treated in a way. Which means that it should, working on it should be just like using regular ebony, with the only thing the manufacturer told me in this email is that when working with it, it might smell a bit like working with polyester, but the dust and such coming from this type of material is similar to regular ebony dust, so you should wear a mask, a respirator, and use dust extraction on your tools, but your tools should work exactly the same as it would on regular ebony, with a bonus that it's set to behave more predictable, so less chance of tear out or unexpected movements because it's heat treated and treated with a resin, so it should work even easier than the ebony. And I expect, because of these characteristics, that, for example, creating your fret slots and especially that inlay is much easier than with some other species of wood we use for fretboards. You should give it a try. I'm not sponsored in any way, except they sent me this one fretboard for me to give it a try. So I said, well, I will give it a try and give my honest opinion in one of my videos. And they didn't even expect me to make a video about it. So they're just curious what my thoughts were about this material. So yeah, give it a go. I'll leave a link to ThermalWood Canada in the description down below. And yeah, they make these fretboards. I believe they do custom work as well, so you can order them in many different colors as well. So yeah, if you like to give them a go, check out the link down below. And yeah, I might use this fretboard on this guitar. Yeah, finding a suitable fretboard for your guitar can be a task on itself, but I think I'm there. I think I'm going to stick with the theme of a Phoenix Rising, and I'm going to go with a flamed ebony fretboard. Of course, Phoenix, fire, flames, you name it. So I thought a flamed fretboard would fit the theme perfectly. And I also want the fretboard to be somewhat on the plainer side. Of course, this beautiful spotted ebony would make a lovely fretboard, or one of those wildly figured ebony fretboards. They're gorgeous on itself, but I think for this guitar build they're just a bit too busy for what I've planned to do with the fretboard itself and the inlay. So I'm going to put these aside so they'll be available for a next build or for a customer guitar. So if you've seen a fretboard you like very much and you want me to build you a guitar with it, just send me an email and we'll sort things out. So now that I've chosen my fretboard, the first thing I need to do is getting it down to thickness and process it so it's nice and straight and even. Currently it's just over 8 millimeters thick, and I'm aiming to get it down to about 7 millimeters using a plane and of course my thickness sander. So clamp it down onto the bench, take out my number 7 plane. I just love to use my number 7 for these kinds of jobs. Make sure it's nice and sharp. And just as with all planing, I have my blade all the way retracted. And I'm going to slowly lower it down onto the fretboard until I feel it's starting to cut. I'm going to give it a little push more. And now I'm taking off very thin shavings. And hopefully the sound quality of the video has improved in comparison to previous two videos. As you've noticed, I shaved my beard and got some new mics. So hopefully this time everything works out a bit better. And as you can see, with taking these very thin shavings, I don't have to worry about tear out and such. Just take a bit more time, be patient. It saves you much time in the long run. I think we're there now. Yeah. Tiny bit more. Tiny high spot in the center. It's gone. Yeah, here we go. So the first fingerboard is nice and flat and almost to thickness, but at least one side is nice and flat so I can run it through my thickness sander. And for our testing purposes, let's see if the ThermalWood Obsidian Ebony planes down just as easy. Remove the sticker. And a little tip, usually I like to use my heat gun to heat up the sticker and remove it. But you could also use a scraper to remove the sticker residue. Oh wow! It scrapes really well. Really smooth finish. I don't think it shows up on camera, but maybe. Even from my scraper I get a real smooth finish. So off to a promising start. I believe this is 9.5 millimeters thick, so I have to remove 1.5 millimeter approximately, get it just under 8, and use the sander to get it down to thickness. Because this being real wood, albeit heat treated, I should be able to plane it. Oh yeah, you can smell it's smelling a bit like fiberglass, like it said on the info I got from the manufacturer, but nothing too bad. Of course, you should wear a respirator, but me wearing a respirator while I'm filming these videos would make me even less understandable as I already am. So, yeah, I won't use a respirator while I'm recording, but be assured, if necessary, I will put on a respirator off camera. But for now, it's not dusty at all. It's a bit weird planing the Obsidian Ebony. It just feels different than regular wood. It's more consistent, if that makes sense. And But you can see if you have a very sharp plane, you can still take off very thin shavings, and yeah, there's a bit of a different feeling than regular wood, untreated wood, but not much, not as much as I expected. And the finish is silky smooth. So I think if you have a very good thicknesser, a spiral colored thicknesser, you can run this through a thicknesser also and you get a very smooth result. But of course, run it through your thicknesser for the first time in very shallow passes. Really test it out. And I'm curious about the back. You can see it's a slightly different color in the back. And I can feel the wood grain in the back, so I'm going to give this a try with my plane as well. Yeah, I'm going to plane these fingerboards down a bit more until I'm almost at the desired thickness, and then I'm going to take them to the thickness sander to get them to the final thickness and nice and parallel and straight. So see you at the thickness sander. Wow, look at this shot, guys. I just peeked at my monitor. I saw this shot. Wow. All right, let's clean it all up, unfortunately, and let's take it to the sander. So I have my drum sander set up and dust extraction hooked on, set to the correct thickness. I have my calipers at the ready, as well as my two fretboards, and yeah, I'm going to use my drum sander to get them to the final thickness. I'm aiming for a thickness to about 6.5, 7 mils thick, so just over 1/4 of an inch. Yeah, using my drum sander just to be precise, and it saves me a whole lot of time. Of course, I could also keep using my planes to get them to the required thickness, and you can do so as well if you're confident with using a plane, and back off your blade, so take shallower passes the closer you get to the required thickness, and you should be fine. Or you could do like I did in the past. If you don't have a drum sander, use a spindle sander and a fence from, for example, your router table of your table saw as a guide on your spindle sander, and run your fretboards through it in between the spindle and the fence. And if you want to know more about that little trick and how I prepared my fretboards in the past, I would highly recommend checking out some of my older videos in which I prepared the fretboards as well. So yeah, without wasting any more time, I'm going to fire up the dust extractor and sand down the last millimeter, 1/2 millimeter of these fretboards. So guys, I just came across a downside of using the Obsidian Ebony. As you can see, it destroyed my sander belt, my sandpaper in my drum sander. What I think happened is that due to the heat generated by sanding, even though I made sure I made very shallow passes each time, I think still the resin in the ebony or the treated maple heated up too much, that the fretboard got stuck underneath the sanding drum and made a nice gouge in my fretboard, and at the same time destroyed my sandpaper. But you can clearly see there are multiple passes where the resin got stuck in the sand drum. So yeah, I think I'm going to need to replace the sandpaper on my drum sander. sort this fretboard out by hand by using a plane. I've just measured how deep this gouge is, and the total thickness is still above 7 millimeters, so I should be able to plane this down and still have a usable fretboard. And same goes for the ebony. I was running these through at the same time, and there's also a small sanding mark on the ebony fretboard, but I think once I've replaced the sandpaper I can still sand down the ebony fretboard to the correct thickness. So yeah, let me sort this all out and I'll be right back. Guys, crisis averted. I managed to save both of these fretboards. And I might have been a bit hasty in my assessment on the Obsidian Ebony and that you couldn't sand it using a drum sander. After planing out the little defects from the mishap, I really want to give it one more try, and I slowed down my conveyor belt even more and took off just the slightest amount with each pass, really checking on the temperature of the fretboard, and when doing so I managed to sand it down correctly to the final thickness of just under 7 millimeters, so just over 1/4 of an inch, and I'm very happy with how these two fretboards turned out eventually. Now it's time to take out the template and draw the outline of the fingerboard onto these two fretboards. So first thing I'm going to do is look at the grain orientation and the grain patterns, and that's the nice thing about this Obsidian Ebony, because it's made out of real wood. There's still a grain pattern and some color variations visible in the fretboard. And I think I like it to go like this. So this is the body side of the neck, and this is going to be the headstock side of the neck. So it's going to be like so. And for the actual ebony fretboard, I think I like it to be darker near the body and lighter near the headstock. So this is going to be the orientation for this one, and it's wide enough but barely for me to cut it and have some strips left over. So I have to be very, very careful. So what I might do is have it like so. Use a pencil to draw the outline. And of course I'm going to mark where the nut is going to be. Right here. And the expected end of the fretboard. Right there. So this is my fretboard, and I'm going to cut this fretboard on the orange line before doing anything else. So guys, because this is the first time I'm doing this kind of a cut, I don't have a jig, so I'm going to freehand this cut, and I'm going to cut it on the line. So I'm going to follow the line as close as possible. I'm not going to cut on the outside of the line as usual, because I need this tiny piece. Hopefully it shows up on camera. I need this tiny piece at a later stage, so the outside. So I'm going to cut it straight on the line. Here we go. So the first fretboard, the Obsidian Ebony, went fairly well, and I have 2 side strips left that I can use later on to make my binding. So now let's cut the regular ebony fretboard. So guys, after some consideration, I think I'm set on the final design. I think the fretboard is going to look something like this. So just 2 millimeters from the side there will be a millimeter white orange stripe. And I've marked it on both fretboards, and I really like how this looks. And for now, the difference between the Obsidian Ebony and the real Ebony, for me at the moment, I'm going with the real Ebony, because it might not show up on the camera, but in real life it's really visible that the Obsidian Ebony has more of a grayish blue tint, or a grayish blue hint to it. And for the look I'm going for, I really prefer the brownish black color of the real Ebony. But yeah, still I'm really impressed with the Obsidian Ebony, and I think on a more modern designed guitar, a more sleek design, this would do great, because you can still see the natural grain of the wood, but it has a really futuristic, sleek look and feel to it in real life, and I hope it comes across that way on camera as well. But yeah, it's nice to work with, nice to plane. You have to be a bit careful when sanding concerning the heat, but overall it's fairly good to work with. I couldn't notice my plane dulling any quicker than on regular ebony, so no problems at all. And it's just a matter of taste, I think, and for me right now it depends on the color. But I still go ahead with making 2 fretboards at the same time, because I can always use this fretboard when it's ready on another guitar, because like I said in my template video, all my necks have similar dimensions except for the headstock, so I can always use this fretboard on a different style Unquendor neck, so no waste there. That said, because I want the orange stripe to be a couple of mils, 2.5 mils from the side, I think I really need to add the orange stripe first to these fretboards before cutting the fret slots, because otherwise I think I will have too much of the fret tank to remove when I'm going to fret these fingerboards, and there's always a slight chance of that fret lifting at the very ends in the future. So I might prefer cutting the fret slot through the orange binding and then afterwards add the ebony back to the side. So to make the thin orange strips to go into the fretboard, I'm going to attempt and make them out of these 2 flamed maple offcuts I had laying around from a previous neck, and both sides are already planed nice and flat, and now I can use my bandsaw with the fence set up to cut a 3mm thin strip from these offcuts, and then use my planes and my sander to get them to a thickness of just under 2 mils. I'm aiming for 2 mils, and we'll go from there. If I'm going to attempt to make them even thinner, I have to see what 2 mils looks like. So yeah, let's first cut these thin strips. So I've got my bandsaw set up so I can cut this very thin strip, about 3 mils thick. So yeah, let's start cutting. So dust extraction, light, here we go. So here we have our 2 flame maple strips, and I couldn't be more happier with how they turned out. Luckily I used a fairly new blade on the bandsaw, and that means that there are hardly any marks of the bandsaw left on the back of this thin maple strip. So I'm fairly confident I don't need to use a plane and I can run these strips straight through the thickness sander. But at first I didn't trust my drum sander to sand these thin little strips down to under 2 mils, but yeah, I've taken some time to dive into setting up the drum sander perfectly to get rid of any play, and I cut another strip of flame maple just to test. So now I have 3 of those thin strips, so I have some spare. And now my drum sander should be able to sand down these thin strips even further without grabbing onto them, or hopefully without any mishaps. It took me quite some time to figure out how to perfectly set up the drum sander. But yeah, I think we're ready. So let's turn on some dust extraction, fire up the drum sander, and let's give it a try. Yeah, some really nice thin strips coming from the drum sander. So I've sanded these strips down to the final thickness of about 1.5 millimeters, so that will give me a clearly visible but subtle line along the edges of the fretboard. And the next thing I'm going to do to help the stain penetrate the wood fully is I'm going to cut little strips, some binding strips from these sections of flame maple. And to help me do that, I'm not going to use the bandsaw. I think that will be a bit overkill and a bit too rough of a cut for these tiny strips. I'm going to use my little Proxen table saw. I think this is the perfect tool for a job like this. It's meant for model making and making small cuts. Guys, don't be fooled by the size of this table saw. I know it might look like a toy, but it certainly isn't. This blade will take off your finger. as easy or maybe even more easy than a big saw. So yeah, I'm always a bit scared of using a table saw, and it might be the reason why I don't have a full-size table saw in my shop. Other than I don't need it that often, but I know it's a very nice tool to have around, but for some reason I'm less scared of my bandsaw or my router table than I am of using a table saw. So yeah, I've got everything hooked up, so let's cut these strips. So guys, here are all the little binding strips done. So I'm going to put this aside for now until we're ready to start cutting the fret slots. So I'm going to clean everything up, put everything away, and then it's time to play with some stain. So guys, for you this might be fun, but for me it's sheer panic, trying something new, something I haven't done before on camera for the first time. But hey, that was the whole purpose of this video series, to get back into building and trying new stuff on camera and overcome my anxiety. So I just have to get on with it. We're going to stain these strips, and to do that I came up with a method I think might work best to fully saturate these strips with stain so they're bright orange all the way through. I went through my house to find a shallow container. I was looking for a big enough serving tray to fit these strips, but the only thing I could find was the lid of a storage container, but it's shallow enough. It's just big enough to hold a couple of these strips, and I keep a couple spare just in case this goes horribly wrong. And what I'm also going to use is one of these, a vacuum bag. I'm hoping that the vacuum, when everything is in this bag, will help me to really get the stain down into those strips of flamed maple. And I think the veneer will, I think the vacuum might be a good idea. I know that when people are treating wood with chemicals and such, they always do it in a vacuum. And the closest thing I got to a vacuum chamber are these bags. And these are not the expensive bags most people use for gloops and such. These are just the cheap ones you can use to store pillows, blankets, sheets, you name it. So they're not even $1 a piece. So I think if it doesn't work, it only has cost me a bit of time, some maple strips, and a cheap vacuum bag. So first thing, of course, we're going to do is apply the vibrant stain. I'm going to use the Zesty Orange from TLC Guitar Goods, and I've tried it already and it's really orange. And if I think it's too bright, luckily I have some spares and I can always use some other stains I have, or mix some stains up if they turn out too bright. But the test I did, I really dig this color. So to apply this stain, I'm of course not going to fill the entire tray with stain. It would be, I think, a waste of stain. So what I'm going to do first is, of course, put on some gloves. I don't want to explain to my colleagues next Monday why my hands are all orange, and will stay that way for a couple of weeks. So put on some gloves. And I'm going to use a bit of this packaging foam as a sponge to first sponge some stain onto the individual strips. And then of course add some extra stain to the tray before I put it in the vacuum bag and put it on the vacuum. I can be a bit liberal, of course, because I really want to Do you guys think this is orange enough? When I'm really trying to get that stain soaked into the flake maple. And this is a nice orange. It's bright, but it isn't, I don't know, orange can be a tricky color to get right. It might be too overwhelming or dull for some reason if you don't get it right. And I think this zesty orange is just what I was looking for. And it will most likely dull down a bit over time when it's dried fully. Oh. All right, plenty of stain. I don't know, maybe giving these strips this sponge bath should have been enough. I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you think it's necessary to put it on the vacuum so the stain gets really soaked and pulled into the wood? Or do you think let it just soak like this should have been sufficient, should have been enough? I don't know. I've never done this before. And I never thought I would ever stain my own veneer. A bit extra. Right. These black pieces are pieces of the sponge, so I'm not too worried about those. The tray is slightly too short, so hopefully that shouldn't be an issue. As much stain as I think would be needed. Yeah, I can really feel the stain soaking into these thin strips all the way through. They're nice and wet all over, so put them under vacuum. Remove my gloves. Oh yeah, I got myself orange. Well, I'm Dutch, so that shouldn't be a problem. So everything is bright and orange now. And of course, because I removed my gloves, because I was afraid to spill orange everywhere from what the stain was on my gloves, and I managed to get orange anywhere, everywhere anyway. Yeah. Let's get this in the vacuum bag as soon as possible. Let's put this aside. Everything is orange. Well, I managed to get my hands orange. Anyway. All right. I wish I had a dedicated vacuum pump, but I don't. I wanted to use my wife's vacuum cleaner for this, but I know if I destroy that one, I still have to buy her a new one. So there's no reason in using my wife's vacuum cleaner. So I'm going to use the shop vac to pull a vacuum in this bag. And hopefully I don't pull too much stain into the vacuum cleaner. Why won't you close on me? Yeah, seam sealed. And now very carefully pull a vacuum. I should have looked for a different vacuum cleaner, but here we go. The stain was rushing towards the vacuum. Maybe if I use a bit of towel, I can prevent some stain from getting into the vacuum cleaner. Oh. No orange at all on the vacuum cleaner or on the shop vac. I think I'm fine. Yeah, just some, so. I think this turned out pretty nice, as expected. The strips of veneer are lying in a small bit of stain, so hopefully it will soak it in, and the pressure of the bag will help with that. Yeah, and the only way to know if this crazy plan succeeded is to let it sit overnight and take them out tomorrow. Now that the orange veneer is soaking overnight and I've managed to clean up most of the orange incident, it's time to focus on the main two fretboards, because I still need to mill them down or cut them down to the correct width to receive the actual binding. And like I said earlier in this video, I really want to stick the orange strips to the side of this fretboard before I'm going to cut the fret slots. I don't want too much of the tang missing off my fret, so first I'm going to mill these down to size. And I think the easiest way to do that is to stick them to a neck template, and these fretboards are still oversized on all sides. And then I'm going to use a router bit, a binding router bit with a bearing that is smaller than the actual cutter head. And by reducing the diameter of the guide bearing, I can set the offset I'm going to route in these two fretboards. And yeah, I think that will be the easiest way to get a consistent width and perfect taper on these two fretboard blanks to glue on the two orange stripes and later on the other section of the fretboard. So I'm going to stick these templates or these neck blanks to the template. And I think I'm going to use just one template. I first thought I can just stick each fretboard to each template, but I thought, well, if something did happen with this cutter bit, I'm cutting straight into my template, so better not mess up both. So if you're going to do this yourself, make sure you have a template that you can replace easily by having a master template as a spare. So yeah, masking tape, super glue. And if you're going to use masking tape and super glue, this is something I recently learned. Use the thick super glue. If you're using thin super glue or medium thin super glue, you have chances, if you're using masking tape and super glue, that as soon as you put your two parts together, the thin super glue spills out because it's too thin. So always use a thicker super glue when doing the masking tape and super glue trick. Knife. We can put these aside. And let's use the Obsidian Ebony fretboard first. And this is way oversized, so that's good. And I'm eyeballing the center line for the masking tape. A little bit of super glue. Yeah, and now with the fretboard stuck in place, let's go to the router table. Before I'm going to use the binding router bit to create a 3mm offset I want on my fingerboard, I'm going to first use a regular flush trim bit to trim the fretboard flush with the template, because I'm a bit worried about taking off 5mm approximately in one go with the binding router bit. So first I'm going to remove 1-2 mils from the fingerboard to get it flush with the template, and then switch over to the binding blade. So I got everything hooked up almost. I remembered I require some power to go to the router table. Like so. And I need to switch on the router underneath the table. Yeah, I've set the height already, and yeah, like always, some dust extraction, and let's start routing. So that was real quick. Now this is the Obsidian Ebony, so not much chance of tear out. Now I can switch my router bits. I'm going to do this live on camera. like so. This is a bit tricky. I really have to set the correct depth, otherwise I will hit the template with the router bit. And I think I'm going to take a bit more care. And I'm not going to do it in one pass, I'm going to take a couple of passes. But yeah, here we go. I think I'll be fine, and luckily I can replace my template if needed. Turn on the router again. Dust extraction. And here we go. Okay, and hopefully it shows up on camera, but this is what it looks like. I now have a 3mm gap or binding channel left. So here's going to go the orange strip we just made, and then just a tiny strip of the fretboard material to close everything off. So, and before I'm going to remove the fingerboard from the template, I'm first going to transfer the center line, because now that these channels are routed, yeah, it's very important to keep the center line. So, little pencil, and I can mark the center line on each side. And it's very hard to see using a pencil. But there's a mark there. And there's a mark there. So now I can take a palette knife and carefully remove the fingerboard. Here we are. Come on. All right. And that was just a tiny bit sticking out. Oh, I can remove it just like so, no tools required. So one down, one left to do.
So, same as the other. Use some masking tape. Bit of blue. Not too much. And let's take the ebony fretboard also to the router table. Guys, I have to confess to you, I think it might be the first time that I've forgotten to hit record before I started routing. I did explain in a clip how I set up my router table and showed you some close-up of the routing process and the end result. But I forgot to hit record, so unfortunately I can't do it again because I have both my fingerboards routed at the moment. So yeah, I'm sorry. Hope I try to not forget it anymore, but I think everyone who has ever made content, who has ever done recording or using a camera had at one point forgotten to hit record. So I'm going to remove the last splinters left by the router bit, and just by cutting them off with my little knife. Like so. And then I'm going to, wait a minute. No, not remove the template yet. Mark the center lines first. I almost messed up. Well, it wouldn't be such a huge problem because I can always find the center by measuring the width of the blank, of course, but yeah, marking them is way easier. So, center line marked, and remove the neck blank. And remove the masking tape. And there's one thing I still need to clean up on both of the fretboards, and that's the very end where the curvature of the template was the transition from the fretboard into the headstock. There's you can see it very clearly on this one. So I'm going to take a chisel and maybe a plane and knock this off so it's nice and straight. Starting with this one. So we can take a nice and sharp chisel, and we're going to remove this bit. And first I'm going to just slice away at that part until I'm almost there, and then I'm going to rest my chisel on the straight edge of the fingerboard. Keep pressure on the chisel and move forward, just like you would use a plane. Like so. So the edges are nice and smooth now, and that's mainly because I used a brand new router bit. And yeah, I think these edges would be suitable for glue up, but if you're not sure, you can always use a plane, again with a shallow setting, and I'm using this small little block plane because it gives me a lot of control and it's razor sharp, and I can run it along the edge, making sure I keep it as perpendicular to the edge as possible. Take off a full-length shaving, and this side is ready for glue up. And I'm only taking off the tiniest amount, and I make sure I'm planing with the grain. So taking off this tiny amount doesn't impact anything at all, because yeah, we're going to use some binding. As long as I keep my taper relatively the same as it is, I should be fine. It shouldn't be visible. Again, take a couple of shavings until you take one long shaving from the entire edge. And now you have a nice edge suitable for a glue up. Well, let's do this one as well. Who cares? Yeah, so. And this is the Obsidian Ebony. And this planes even easier. Again, full length shaving. So I have a nice glue up surface for once the orange veneer is ready. But maybe, and I have to think about this for a moment, because I might need to cut the fret slots earlier than I expected, because I'm thinking about having the orange strip go down the side and cross the fretboard at the bottom and go back. So that would mean that I would also remove a section of the underside of the fretboard and glue that back on, all with miter joints. To make it myself even more complicated. So I have to think if I want just the strips run on the sides and just run off the fretboard, or if I want to have another stripe at the underside of the fretboard as well. And maybe thinking about it, if I'm doing that, I might also have to do the headstock. But maybe that's too much. Maybe I'll just have to keep it as a single stripe, and that's a design decision. I'm going to take a cup of coffee over and think about it some more. Hey guys, this is how a lot of these design decisions are made, just enjoying a cup of coffee, sitting at the bench and staring at parts. Because sometimes something does look great on a rendering or a drawing, but when you're going to make it in real life, full scale, it sometimes turns out a bit different. And you might need to do some last minute changes or reconsider your design. And now I'm considering if I like the future orange strip to go more to the inside of the fretboard, so I have a slightly wider black outline, and whether or not to continue the orange line also at the bottom. Oh, my mug is in the way. Also at the bottom of the fretboard. And of course that determines the order I have to do things in. Yeah, some more thinking to do. And I ran out of coffee. Bah. Decisions, decisions, decisions. And commitment. It's not only decisions. But it's also having the guts to commit to your ideas without second guessing. Yeah. Let me sit on this some more. And that's unfortunately all I have time for in this video. I hope you liked it, and if you did, of course, leave a like. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, let me know in the comment section down below. It really helps other viewers, other YouTube viewers, to find my content, which in the long run supports me and my channel. If you'd like to support me more directly, consider getting yourself a nice Unquendor Guitars t-shirt by visiting the Unquendor merchandise shop underneath this video. I really appreciate all the support you guys can give me. If you're new to my channel and you happen to like what you've seen, please consider subscribing and hit that little notification bell and set it to notify all, so YouTube will notify you when I upload something new and you don't have to miss out on anything. Yeah, that's it for this video. I hope to see you all in the next one, but until then, take care and bye bye.